A warm breeze drifted through the dusty streets, carrying with it the muted sounds of a sprawling city. Under the shadows of towering buildings, a young boy with short black hair and brown eyes trudged along, a tattered red shirt clinging to his thin frame. The day's heat made his throat feel parched, but Billy Batson paid no mind to thirst, he was used to it. As he scouted for any discarded morsels of food or overlooked treasures, he felt the subtle current of fate tugging him onward, as if invisible winds were forever pushing him in new directions. He found an alley dotted with half-broken crates, a dumpster missing one of its steel lids, and piles of trashed cardboard and plastic. With practiced expertise, he fished out a few apple cores, some fresher than others. After a moment, he spotted a small plastic ring glinting in the sunlight. He brushed off the grime and pocketed it, smiling to himself at having discovered yet another trinket. One man's trash, he whispered, gripping the ring in a closed fist, is another man's treasure. He was about to slip away when a faint, tingling feeling pricked at his spine. It wasn't the first time this had happened. Strange, cosmic currents seemed to guide him whenever something significant was about to occur. Trusting that impulse, Billy slung his old backpack, filled with scraps, half-eaten food, and the scattered remains of his travels, over his shoulder and followed that intuition up the alleyway. He turned a corner and stumbled upon an old man cloaked in layers of tattered fabric. The man's beard was long and snowy white, his eyes sharp despite the wear of countless centuries. Billy couldn't guess his age. Something about the man felt ancient, as though he'd seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations. All at once, Billy understood, this was the wizard. He had met the old man only once before, in an unexpected dream where thunder boomed in the distance and lightning tore the night sky asunder. Now, the wizard stood before him in plain daylight. There was a certain finality in the man's expression, an acceptance that a destiny he'd guarded for so long was finally about to be passed on. Billy Batson, the wizard rasped, placing a trembling hand upon the boy's shoulder, I have watched all of Earth's history. Past, present, and future. You alone shall become the champion of justice. Take my name. Speak it proudly. And let it fill you with the power to protect this world. Billy stared, awestruck. He remembered the name from his dream. You mean? The word you told me? The wizard nodded. His voice was tired, yet resolute. Yes. Shazam. My name. But now. It is yours to command. A sudden swirl of wind coursed around them, crackling with energy. The old wizard's eyes glowed faintly as he summoned the last vestige of his power. A flash of light enveloped Billy, and he felt an otherworldly warmth flood through his body. It was as though time paused around them, the air became thick with magic. The wizard let out one final breath, a soft smile on his lips, before his form dissipated into shimmering motes of white light. As soon as he was gone, Billy felt the tidal wave of energies recede, leaving him panting in the alley. Slowly, he rose to his feet. A quiet resolve set in his eyes. He remembered the wizard's faith in him, the promise of a new life, a life dedicated to protecting others. So, he tested the word. Shazam, he shouted. Lightning crashed from the sky, though there wasn't a cloud above. Energy surged through him like 1,000 roaring rivers. In an instant, he transformed, no longer a scrawny child in a ragged shirt, but a tall, muscular figure clad in a bright red suit, gold sash, and a white cape trimmed with gold. On his chest gleamed a large yellow lightning bolt. He marveled at his adult hands, broad, strong, pulsating with power. In his new form, he felt unstoppable. A grin tugged at the corners of his mouth. At last, he was Mightiest Man, the champion of Earth, the embodiment of the wizard's ancient magic. But as triumphant as he felt, he was still Billy inside. And Billy was hardly a martial arts master or a strategist. He was just a boy thrust into a world of limitless power, with little knowledge of how to harness it. Still, the wizard had believed in him. That had to count for something. He propelled himself into the air, surprised when he overshot and nearly crashed into a rooftop water tower. Laughing sheepishly, he soared again, trying to control his speed. He soared higher, relishing the wind against his face. At that very moment, Billy, now Mightiest Man, was blissfully unaware of the cosmic tapestry unfolding around him, an evil so great it would threaten the entire world, and perhaps even the cosmos. If only he knew that his newfound power would soon be tested. Far across the city, behind the steel doors of an underground lab reeking of chemicals, a figure hunched over a cluttered desk. Flasks bubbled over, stacks of textbooks littered every corner, and half-finished gadgets blinked lights in haphazard unison. Dr. Savannah, a bald, bluish-hued man with pointy ears and an unusually large nose, scowled at his reflection in a warped mirror he'd installed above his workspace. You truly are the most handsome man alive, he said aloud, adjusting his round black glasses. Their white lenses were so reflective they glowed with an eerie sheen. Those fools at the academy. They said I was hideous. They ridiculed me for my intellect. But I'll show them. He grinned, jagged teeth flashing. When the entire world bows before me, they'll realize who is truly beautiful. Savannah clenched a small device in his hand, a transdimensional tracking contraption, homemade from scrap parts. He had refined the device to hunt for particular energy signatures. And he had discovered a source, the wizard's old magic. At first, he believed it was some legend or hoax. Now, though, the readings were almost off the charts. He suspected that whoever possessed such power was more than just an ally or an enemy, they were an obstacle. Someone who might stand in his way. He aimed to destroy them at first chance. But before he could begin formulating his plan, a strange presence intruded upon his lab. A swirl of shimmering dust manifested in the air, and from it stepped a tall man cloaked in dark regal attire, eyes glowing with an eerie radiance. Savannah spun to face him, fists clenched. The intruder's aura pulsed, faint but undeniable. Dr. Savannah felt the temperature drop several degrees. "Who are you?" he snapped. "I am Aura Seer, the stranger said, his voice smooth as silk. "But you may call me the Aura Seer." Savannah narrowed his eyes, searching for any weapon within arm's reach. "You dare to invade my lab uninvited? Why shouldn't I throw you out this instant?" The Aura Seer's lips curled into a slow smile. He extended a hand. "Because I come to offer you an alliance. I know of your intellect. And your hatred of the world." Savannah scoffed. "Ha! I hate everyone, including you. I have no use for allies. Begone." "Very well," the Aura Seer said quietly, flicking his finger. All at once, a shimmering light radiated from his form, casting swirling auras across the lab. Savannah flinched as the illusions danced around him, each one monstrous or imposing. It was as though a legion of hidden spirits crowded the small space. In that moment, Dr. Savannah felt a primal fear stir in his stomach, a sudden recognition that this stranger possessed powers beyond the laws of mundane science. "If you ever reconsider," said the Aura Seer in a hypnotic tone, his eyes glinting with otherworldly suggestion, "find me. We could achieve so much together." He vanished into swirling motes of light, leaving Dr. Savannah panting, half enraged and half captivated by what he had just witnessed. But Savannah was not the type to bow to intimidation. He would not pledge loyalty to anyone. Still, an inkling of curiosity about the Aura Seer's next move tugged at him. For now, he'd keep his distance, and keep watch. Meanwhile, in a museum showcasing ancient Egyptian relics, Dan Garrett gingerly handled a small, carved blue scarab. The artifact glimmered like a living sapphire in his palms. He was an archaeologist, yes, but also something more. Ever since he had discovered the scarab in the tomb of Ka-Efe-Re, a cruel pharaoh from ages past, Dan had been experiencing strange dreams and visions. Ethereal phantoms of long-dead pharaohs spoke to him, urging him to protect the world using the scarab's power. "But is it truly magic?" Dan murmured, turning the scarab this way and that under the museum's lights. He was a skeptic at heart, requiring substantial evidence to prove anything supernatural. Yet he had tested the words the ancient pharaohs whispered to him, Kajida. Upon speaking them, his whole world transformed. He became the sacred scarab, a costumed hero with superhuman strength, X-ray and telescopic vision, telepathy, energy projection, flight, and superhuman durability. He could barely believe it even now. But the truth stood undeniable. "Professor Hoshid?" he called out. "Are you ready with the notes on Ka-Efe-Re's tomb inscriptions?" From behind a towering statue of Horus, a beautiful Egyptian woman emerged. Professor Lori Hoshid had long black hair, brown eyes, pale skin, and an undeniable air of elegance. She wore a flowing outfit styled after traditional Egyptian attire, soft linen wrapped about her figure, golden accessories shimmering against her wrists and ankles. "I have them right here, Dan," she said with a gentle smile, handing over her notes. "Everything we translated so far points to Ka-Efe-Re's unstoppable greed. He used dark magic in an attempt to conquer the ancient world." Dan nodded, scanning the notes. "It's strange that all records say only the sacred scarab could seal him away. But if that's the case, and if Ka-Efe-Re has truly reawakened..." A worried look clouded Lori's eyes. She remembered how Dan, in a moment of pure fascination, had taken the scarab from the tomb. That single act had unleashed Ka-Efe-Re back into the world. She was the only one who knew Dan's secret identity as the sacred scarab. She placed a comforting hand on his arm. "We'll figure this out. You're the sacred scarab now, right? That means you can stop him." Dan's lips pressed into a thin line. I hope so. My powers are gone the moment I lose possession of the Scarab. And I. A sudden crash sounded from across the museum. Glass shattered, alarms blared. Security guards scrambled. Dan and Lori raced to investigate. As they stepped into the main exhibit hall, they froze at the sight of a hulking figure wrapped in tattered bandages, eyes glowing red with simmering hate. Ka-Efe-Ri, Dan whispered, heart pounding. The undead pharaoh let loose a guttural snarl, lifting a massive, decaying arm. He wore only a black loincloth, his muscular frame towering over the museum guards who now swarmed around him. Bow before your one true ruler, he roared, eyes flaring. Instantly, twin beams of crimson energy erupted from his gaze, snaring two guards in mid-charge. The men trembled, their limbs stiffening as if paralyzed by unnatural force. They collapsed, unconscious, helpless. Ka-Efe-Ri's paralyzing eye beams, Dan said, transfixed. Lori tugged on his sleeve, frantic. We need the Scarab. Hurry, Dan. He clutched the blue Scarab at his waist. Though he hadn't expected to fight Ka-Efe-Ri so soon, there was no turning back. Taking a deep breath, he spoke the words, Kaji-da. A swirl of brilliant azure energy enveloped him. In a flash, Dan was transformed into the sacred Scarab, clad in a light blue jumpsuit, red gloves, red boots, red belt, and a pair of red goggles. The jeweled Scarab perched upon the center of his belt gleamed. He soared forward, fists raised, meeting the undead pharaoh head-on. Ka-Efe-Ri roared in recognition. Sacred Scarab. I destroyed you millennia ago. No matter, you shall fall again. Their clash shook the hall. The pharaoh's fists crashed into Sacred Scarab's fists with a thunderous boom, sending tremors through the marble floor. Ka-Efe-Ri might have been a monstrous brute, but he was also capable of flight. He rose above the museum's exhibits with surprising agility, bandages trailing behind him, and unleashed a shrill battle cry, Eye of the Ancients. Twin beams of red hate energy blasted from his eyes. Sacred Scarab countered with a burst of sparkling blue energy from his hands. Their energy collided in mid-air, crackling and arcing across the room. Onlookers scattered for cover. Artifacts shattered. A statue of Anubis exploded from the raw power washing over it. Telescopic vision, lock on. Sacred Scarab yelled, focusing his X-ray and telescopic sight on the pharaoh's weak points. He aimed carefully and unleashed a second volley of brilliant blue energy, striking Ka-Efe-Ri's knees. The undead giant roared, dropping to the ground. For a moment, it seemed Sacred Scarab held the advantage, until Ka-Efe-Ri's paralyzing beams managed to graze him. Sacred Scarab's body locked in place. He groaned as numbness crept up his arms, threatening to knock him out. Summoning his willpower, he channeled a telepathic burst to momentarily disrupt Ka-Efe-Ri's concentration. The pharaoh growled, staggering back, giving Sacred Scarab the moment he needed to break free from the paralysis. Lori watched, anxiety etched across her face, as the two foes continued their fierce exchange of power blasts and thunderous punches. Indeed, it seemed that Sacred Scarab might subdue his ancient nemesis once again. But unbeknownst to them, another figure lingered in the shadows, observing every move with hunger in his eyes, Orus Surman, the Seer. Orus had come to the museum in search of Dan Garrett, suspecting him to be the modern Sacred Scarab. His extensive research into magical relics had led him here, and with his aura vision, he perceived the swirling energies around Ka-Efe-Ri and the Scarab. For years, Orus had sought out individuals endowed with magic words. In ancient times, legends spoke of a hero who uttered a secret magic word to access godlike powers, and another who called upon a different magic word to become the Sacred Scarab. If Orus could glean those words, absorb that knowledge, he believed he could accumulate enough magical synergy to rewrite reality itself. His reasons were simple but twisted. He wanted to recreate the world so that Lori Hoshide would be forced to love him again. He recalled the nights they had spent together, once upon a time, passionately studying ancient tomes in candlelit libraries. He had never told her how profoundly he loved her, and before he could, she fell for her new boss, Dan Garrett. The heartbreak had all but destroyed Orus, pushing him into a maddening quest for omnipotent magic. He told himself it was for the sake of their romance, but beneath that, the bitter sting of jealousy festered into obsession. As Ka-Efe-Ri and Sacred Scarab's duel raged, the museum's ceilings quivered under the strain. When an opening emerged, Orus carefully extended a hand, letting his aura-based power swirl around Ka-Efe-Ri's mind. If he could enslave the pharaoh to his will, that might prove beneficial. He whispered, "Bow to me," in a barely audible voice. A flicker of hypnotic suggestion emanated from his aura. Ka-Efe-Ri blinked, momentarily confused by the flicker of swirling illusions creeping at the edges of his vision. But the undead tyrant roared in defiance, forcibly shaking off the mental intrusion. Horus frowned, stepping deeper into the gloom. Strong mind. No matter, I can be patient. Let them wear each other down. He watched Sacred Scarab deliver a vicious energy burst that slammed Ka-Efe into the museum floor. With the undead king pinned, Sacred Scarab pressed his advantage. For the good of the world, return to your slumber, Ka-Efe. Energy seal. Summoning all his might, Sacred Scarab conjured a swirling vortex of blue energy. It coalesced around Ka-Efe's body, threatening to bind his very essence. The pharaoh howled in protest, the bandages around him flaring like angry serpents. Slowly but surely, Ka-Efe was dragged downward through a rift in the floor. The magical seal would not destroy him. Sacred Scarab knew that was impossible without locking the scarab in the tomb forever. But at least it would contain him for a short while. In one final cry, the pharaoh sank into the swirling vortex, glaring with malevolent hatred at Sacred Scarab. Then, the museum fell silent. Rubble shifted, dust settled. Sacred Scarab floated down to Laurie's side, quickly checking if she was safe. The swirling aura of energy around him dissipated. Laurie breathed a sigh of relief, though worry still lingered in her eyes. She gently touched the scarab on his belt. He'll be back eventually, won't he? Sacred Scarab nodded grimly. Yes. And next time, he may be stronger. But for now, the world is safe. From the sidelines, the Seer retreated quietly, forging a plan of his own. He would need more power to bring Ka-Efe fully under his control. Perhaps an alliance with another hateful genius would serve him well after all. Meanwhile, on a distant rooftop, Billy Batson, once again in his child form, sat perched, overlooking the city lights. Although he had grown increasingly comfortable living most of his time as Mightiest Man, there were moments when exhaustion, or curiosity, compelled him to revert to his human self. He chewed on a half-eaten sandwich from his pack, scanning the horizon. The wizard had passed on all his powers and responsibilities, but not much in the way of instructions. Billy had no mentor. He had no parents either. The city's homeless shelters recognized him as that vagabond kid who never stayed for more than a night. Is this what being a champion of justice means? He mumbled, gazing at neon signs flickering in the distance. Just wandering around, waiting for trouble? A part of him craved a real home, a steady meal, someone to guide him. But an even bigger part longed for adventure, for the next big challenge. Perhaps that was why the wizard chose him. Someone who refused to stay still, who let the winds of fate carry him from one place to the next. When he finished the sandwich, Billy stood up, brushing off crumbs. A tingle of anticipation coursed through him. He wanted to go for a midnight flight. Shazam, he cried. Lightning tore across the sky, enveloping Billy in glorious radiance. In a blink, Mightiest Man soared into the heavens, a streak of red and gold cutting through the night. He truly was mightier than any mortal. If only he had the knowledge or discipline to wield that power to its fullest, he might have soared beyond the stratosphere. As he flew, he picked up the distant wail of police sirens. A tingle of heroic duty sparked in his chest. He sped toward the commotion, wanting to help. On the ground below, Dr. Savannah was in the midst of a triumphant cackle. He had just tested a new device, a giant mechanical automaton powered by stolen electricity, and had used it to rob a small bank. The police were powerless to stop him as he marched down the street, controlling the robot from within its steel chest cavity. A rhythmic clang reverberated as the mechanical monstrosity stomped forward, scattering police cars like toys. Ha! Pathetic. Dr. Savannah boomed over the automaton's loudspeaker. You think you can stand against the greatest mind on Earth? One police officer shouted futilely into a megaphone. Come out, Savannah. You're surrounded. But the monstrous machine simply swatted aside the squad cars. From above, Mightiest Man rocketed into view. Stop right there, he bellowed, his voice echoing across the deserted streets. Savannah craned his neck inside the cockpit, spotting the red-suited figure hovering overhead. So you're the one with that bizarre magical energy signature, Savannah muttered. Then into the loudspeaker, you. The buffoon in red. I've been looking for you. Mightiest Man's eyes widened. He wasn't used to hearing people address him so rudely. I'm not a buffoon, he stammered. But you need to stop hurting people. Now. Savannah sneered. Make me, fool. With a press of a lever, the automaton's arm unleashed a swirling pulse of electricity. Mightiest Man barely dodged, the crackling wave scorching the side of a nearby building. Gritting his teeth, he soared in with a powerful punch. Fist of Olympus, he roared, improvising an attack name as he flew. His blow connected with the automaton's metal chest, denting it inward. But Mightiest Man's inexperience showed, he didn't anticipate the robot's swiftly rising arm. It smashed him across the street, sending him skidding along the pavement. The crowd of onlookers gasped. He's so strong, but he's kind of sloppy, one murmured. Mightiest Man groaned, standing up and rubbing the back of his neck. He reminded himself that, despite his might, he didn't really know how to fight effectively. But that didn't matter. He had a job to do. He sprinted back into the fray with incredible speed, shouting, Herculean charge. Dr. Sivana's robot lurched, trying to brace itself, but Mightiest Man slammed into it headfirst, toppling the giant machine. Sivana cursed as the automaton crashed, arms flailing. The police took cover behind barricades, but the machine's thrashing limbs bashed into them, causing more havoc. The ground shook under the weight of the mechanical behemoth. Summoning reserves of strength, Mightiest Man pried open the automaton's chest panel, revealing a furious Dr. Sivana at the controls. For a moment, their eyes locked. Sivana's brown eyes glowed with malice, while Mightiest Man's looked conflicted. He didn't want to hurt this strange man. With a hiss, Dr. Sivana flicked a switch. A hidden cannon popped out of the robot's chest interior, launching a blast of scorching plasma. Mightiest Man cried out, the explosion tossing him back. Fire tore through his uniform, though it quickly reknit itself, courtesy of the wizard's protective magic. Oh, you're a tough one, Sivana snarled, climbing out of the ruined cockpit. But you're still no match for my genius. Mightiest Man coughed away smoke, setting his stance. He felt the wizard's power surging through him, urging him to stand firm.
I won't let you harm anyone else, Dr. Sivana.
Sivana sneered, raising a small handheld device. I do as I please, you insufferable brat. Perish. Yet before either of them could act, swirling motes of light appeared between them. A tall figure in dark, regal attire materialized, aura shimmering ominously. Mightiest Man blinked. Who? The Aura Seer, Sivana spat, stepping back warily. What are you doing here? Aura Seerman merely smiled. Doctor, you're out of your depth battling this champion alone. I come bearing an offer. Together, we can. Bah! Sivana cut him off. I need no one. Mightiest Man glanced warily between them. He didn't recognize this Aura Seer, but something about the man's aura felt intangible yet suffocating. Then, the Aura Seer's voice dripped with hypnotic cadence. Fall asleep, champion. Mightiest Man blinked, almost feeling his eyelids grow heavy. The swirling aura around Aura seemed to intensify, the streetlights dancing as illusions flickered in and out. For a split second, Billy's mind wavered. The crowd gasped as Mightiest Man fell to one knee, struggling to keep his consciousness afloat. Dr. Sivana leapt at the opportunity, preparing a finishing blow. He raised his device to unleash an energy beam aimed right at Mightiest Man's head. Now you die, so-called champion. But at the last moment, Mightiest Man clenched his fists, channeling the wizard's power. He forced himself awake and yelled, Thunder shock. Lightning rained down from the sky in a dazzling display, striking the street. The shockwave threw Dr. Sivana, Aura Seer, and half the onlookers off their feet. The battered automaton sparked and smoked. When the dust cleared, Mightiest Man had soared high above them. He was not about to lose here, but the presence of two villains at once worried him. He decided to keep his distance, for now. Speeding away, he set off on a zigzagging flight path across the city. Dr. Sivana stood, trembling with fury. Aura Seer brushed dirt from his regal cloak. Your arrogance is your undoing, Sivana, Horus remarked quietly. You might have destroyed him, had you trusted me. But so be it. Sivana glowered, adjusting his broken glasses. You said you wanted an alliance. Why should I trust you, or anyone? Because we share a common enemy. That was Mightiest Man. And trust me, he's only the beginning. Another champion, the sacred Scarab, also stands in our way. We could combine forces to neutralize them both. No, Sivana spat. I prefer working alone. Horus shrugged. As you wish. But do not think I'll give you the same choice again. With that, the Aura Seer vanished in a swirl of ethereal light, leaving Dr. Sivana alone amidst the wreckage of his fallen robot. Days passed, and tension simmered across the city. Reports of sightings of the undead giant Ka-Efe began popping up in remote locales, rumors of him gathering undead minions from hidden catacombs. Rumors also spread about Dr. Sivana's escaped labs, full of strange contraptions. Meanwhile, Oris Surman quietly tracked Dan Garrett, rummaging through the archaeologist's notes in an attempt to glean the actual phrase that unleashed the sacred scarab's powers. At the museum, Dan and Lori sat in a private office, documents strewn across the desk, trying to piece together a new plan to contain Ka-Efe before he rose again. He would inevitably break free of the partial seal. "We need to discover a more permanent solution," Dan muttered, poring over papyrus fragments. Lori rubbed her temples. "The old texts say we can only seal Ka-Efe for good by leaving the scarab in his tomb, but that would strip you of your powers. And the world needs the sacred scarab." Dan sighed. "I know. I just can't." Suddenly, the office door slammed open. A swirl of shimmering aura preceded the arrival of Oris Surman. Lori gasped, shooting to her feet. "Oris? What? Why?" Dan was on high alert. "You know this man, Lori?" She nodded, voice trembling. "Yes. Once. A long time ago, we studied magic together. But Oris, what are you doing?" Oris only had eyes for Lori. "I've come to reclaim what was taken from me," he said softly. Then his gaze flicked to Dan. "And to learn the sacred phrase that transforms you into the scarab. If not by persuasion, then by force." Dan stepped forward protectively. "Over my dead body." Oris's lips curled. "That can be arranged." He extended his hand, swirling aura illusions forming around Dan and Lori. The illusions made the office appear to spiral, walls twisting like reflections in a funhouse mirror. Dan fought to keep his head clear, but Lori nearly swooned from the overstimulation. "Lori." Dan grabbed her, trying to shield her from the swirling illusions. Oris advanced. "You broke my heart, Lori. Chasing this man, leaving me behind. But worry not. I shall rewrite this reality so that we can be together again." He channeled a wave of hypnotic energy toward Dan, but Dan mustered enough focus to press the scarab on his belt. He whispered Kaji Da. In a flash, he transformed into the sacred scarab. With a single mighty blow, he sent a wave of psychic force that shattered Oris's illusions momentarily, clearing Lori's mind. She gasped, stumbling back, while the sacred scarab soared at Oris. "Energy strike," he yelled, launching a volley of azure blasts. Each bolt crackled with sizzling arcs of telepathic might. Oris, however, was cunning and quick. He ducked the strikes with mesmerizing grace, intensifying the illusions as he weaved through the barrage. On top of that, he employed a new trick, focusing his aura around his figure. He made himself appear enormous and terrifying. Sacred Scarab paused, startled at the sudden monstrous visage that seemed to tower above him. Oris's voice boomed from behind the illusory beast, "Submit to me, or watch your mind unravel." But the Sacred Scarab clenched his fists, forcibly reminding himself that illusions were illusions. "You'll have to do better than that. X-ray vision, dispel." He activated the Scarab's specialized vision, seeing through the illusions, revealing Oris's true form. Then with a single well-placed flying kick, Sacred Scarab sent Oris smashing into the office wall. Before he could press his advantage, the door burst open again. This time, a monstrous figure wrapped in bandages loomed in the doorway. Ka-Efe had returned, having tracked the Scarab's energy signature here. "Sacred Scarab," he growled, "this time, you die." A guttural laugh followed as the giant undead pharaoh soared in, swinging a powerful fist. Sacred Scarab blocked, but the force sent him sliding back. Oris, pinned under debris, smirked. At that very moment, Dr. Savannah's cackle echoed from the corridor. "Fools! This is all too perfect." He emerged, remote devices in hand, accompanied by a small army of mechanical drones. He'd been tracking the aura disturbances all along and seized the moment to strike. Lori cowered behind a desk, terrified at the gathering storm of evil in one small office. Sacred Scarab braced himself. This was too many threats at once. The Aura Seer saw his opening. He poured all his hypnotic power outward, capturing both Ka-Efe and Dr. Savannah in overlapping illusions. "Gaze upon my monstrous aura," he thundered. Ka-Efe's red eyes momentarily dulled as illusions hammered at his psyche, twisting reality around him so that Oris appeared an unholy titan. Dr. Savannah, likewise, reeled back, shaking, a single word escaping his lips: "No. You can't be so powerful." Seizing the advantage, Oris stepped free of the rubble. "You will obey me," he commanded. "Both of you. We shall lure out Mightiest Man and the Sacred Scarab together. And you shall aid me in extracting their magic words." Dr. Savannah's mental defenses cracked first. Though he loathed relying on anyone, seeing the illusions swirl around him triggered buried insecurities. For a moment, he felt like a child, mocked and humiliated by everyone. He snarled, but was forced to nod. Fine. For now, he spat. Ka-Efe-Ri, arrogance blazing, resisted a bit longer. But Horus amped up the illusions, bombarding him with twisted horrors. Slowly, the undead pharaoh's rebellious glare turned to a subdued scowl. As you wish, he growled. Lori watched in horror. Sacred Scarab swallowed, retreating to her side. The three villains, Horus, Savannah, and Ka-Efe-Ri, now stood united in their unholy alliance, bound not by trust but by fear. Days blurred into nights as the city fell under a palpable tension. Word spread of an unholy trinity of villains, terrorizing labs and artifact vaults in search of something. Mightiest Man tried patrolling day and night, but they always moved just beyond his reach. Sacred Scarab, too, found himself stretched thin, knowing Ka-Efe-Ri answered to Horus's illusions rather than being truly loyal. Finally, the villains made their move. On a broad plateau on the city's outskirts, where ancient ruins had once been uncovered, Savannah deployed a device that broadcasted high-frequency energy signals, intended to draw out the two heroic champions. The place was littered with machinery, crates of stolen relics, and half-unearthed pillars from centuries-old civilizations. Under the moonlight, Mightiest Man arrived first, descending like a scarlet meteor. You wanted me? You got me, he shouted, voice echoing across the plateau. From behind a half-buried obelisk, the alliance emerged. Ka-Efe-Ri hovered menacingly, bandages fluttering in the wind. Savannah stood smirking in a white lab coat, fiddling with a handheld device. Seer glowed with an ominous aura, illusions dancing at the periphery of Mightiest Man's vision. At almost the same moment, Sacred Scarab swooped in from the opposite side, drawn by the same energy broadcast. He landed near Mightiest Man, shooting him a glance that was equal parts curiosity and caution. Mightiest Man froze. This was the first time he'd come face to face with the Sacred Scarab. The red and blue-clad hero radiated a power that felt somewhat similar to his own. Sacred Scarab sized Mightiest Man up. You must be that champion who calls lightning, he said, voice measured. Are you friend or foe? Mightiest Man blinked, noticing how tense Sacred Scarab looked. I'm a hero, he exclaimed, childish sincerity in his tone. I came to protect everyone from those guys. He pointed at the trio of villains. Sacred Scarab nodded, relief washing over him. Then we are allies. Savannah cackled, stepping forward. How nauseatingly wholesome. But you're both fools. He pressed a button on his handheld device, unleashing arcs of sizzling purple energy. Seer raised his arms high, conjuring illusions across the plateau. Illusory beasts made of shimmering starlight sprang forth, clawing at the heroes. Ka-Efe-Ri soared overhead, unleashing a barrage of paralyzing beams, forcing Mightiest Man and Sacred Scarab to evade in tandem. Twin paralyzing gaze. Ka-Efe-Ri roared, twin beams crossing paths. Scarab shield, Dan shouted, forming a protective barrier of energy in front of them. Mightiest Man countered with a thunderous clap of his hands, releasing a shockwave. Booming thunderclap. The illusions dissipated momentarily, giving the heroes a chance to charge forward. Mightiest Man hurled himself at Ka-Efe-Ri, fists swinging with unstoppable might. Meanwhile, Sacred Scarab locked onto Savannah's device with telescopic vision, launching concentrated blasts. Precision beam, he yelled, striking the device and causing it to erupt in a shower of sparks. Savannah cursed, stumbling back. Horus circled the battlefield, illusions swirling about him like a cloak. Look at the brilliance of my aura, champions. Behold your doom. He intoned. Waves of disorienting lights hammered at Mightiest Man's senses. He staggered, feeling as though the earth tilted beneath him. Ka-Efe-Ri seized the chance to slam a monstrous fist into the hero's side, sending him crashing through an ancient column. Dust filled the air. Sacred Scarab soared to help him, but Dr. Savannah's mechanical drones swarmed the skies, forcing him to fend them off mid-flight. Scarab shock, he cried, unleashing bursts of energy that caused the drones to explode in sizzling plumes of shrapnel. On the ground, Mightiest Man gasped, pinned by falling rubble. He coughed, eyes blazing with determination. I won't lose, he snarled, pushing the debris aside. Summoning the speed of Mercury, he streaked forward, surprising Ka-Efe-Ri with a punishing uppercut. Lightning upper. Ka-Efe-Ri tumbled back, roaring in outrage. Seer descended upon Mightiest Man, illusion swirling. Your magic word. Give it to me, he hissed. The illusions intensified, warping the entire plateau into a surreal kaleidoscope of color and sound. Mightiest man's vision blurred. He felt himself slip from reality. Across the battlefield, Sacred Scarab managed to break free from the drones and soared at Horus, tackling him from behind. Release him. He locked Horus in a telepathic grapple, attempting to disrupt the illusions. Their minds clashed, swirling aura versus telepathic might. Get out of my head, Horus snarled, focusing to blast Sacred Scarab away with a wave of swirling illusions. But the momentary break freed Mightiest Man from the illusion's grip. Desperate, Dr. Savannah commanded the battered Ka-Efe-Ri, stop them. Crush them. Ka-Efe-Ri roared in fury, flaring his bandages as he soared high. Eye of the Ancients. Another twin blast rained down. Sacred Scarab projected a field of protective energy around Mightiest Man, saving them both from paralysis. Thanks, Mightiest Man said, panting. Sacred Scarab gave a quick nod. Watch your left, he warned, as Horus launched a barrage of illusions. The illusions took the form of spectral serpents. They coiled around Mightiest Man and Sacred Scarab, hissing, illusions so vivid that the two heroes felt phantom fangs pressing into their flesh. Their minds reeled. Struggling to remain clear-headed, Sacred Scarab extended his telepathy to Mightiest Man. Focus on the real threat. Mightiest Man nodded, remembering the wizard's advice to harness courage in the face of illusions. Summoning a burst of speed, he darted forward, forging right through the illusory serpents. The illusions flickered and parted around him as if parted by raw willpower. He closed in on Horus. No illusions can hide you from me. Mightiest Man shouted. Thunder Fist. He brought down a tremendous blow. Horus raised an arm to defend, his swirling aura colliding with the raw might behind Mightiest Man's strike. A shockwave erupted, sending Horus skidding across the plateau. Now, Sacred Scarab soared in behind him, fists crackling with azure power. Scarab Comet Punch. He slammed into Horus from behind, hurling him into Ka-Efe-Ri. The undead pharaoh snarled, momentarily tangling with Horus's flailing limbs. Dr. Savannah, standing to the side, realized the illusions were losing effectiveness. Panicked, he shouted, Ka-Efe-Ri, do something. But the pharaoh was enraged at having been inadvertently struck by Horus. With a furious roar, Ka-Efe-Ri lashed out at Horus. You are a worm, mortal, to think you can control me with illusions. Horus hissed, eyes glowing with angry aura. Remember your place, Pharaoh. I own you. Enough, bellowed Dr. Savannah. Stop fighting each other and kill the heroes. But Ka-Efe-Ri had reached a breaking point. Freed from some of Horus's illusions by raw anger, he turned, eyes blazing, and struck Horus with a punishing blow that slammed him into an ancient ruin. Mightiest Man and Sacred Scarab seized this moment of discord among their foes. They exchanged glances, wordlessly agreeing to capitalize on the chaos. Combine our attacks? Mightiest Man asked, offering a small grin. Sacred Scarab nodded. Let's do it. They ascended together, swirling arcs of red lightning and azure energy crackling around them. The entire plateau lit up with dazzling brilliance as they launched simultaneous blasts downward. Shazam's wrath. Mightiest Man roared, unleashing a column of lightning so intense it scorched the ground. Sacred Wave. Sacred Scarab cried, amplifying the lightning with his own psychic and energy-based power. The combined strike crashed onto the battlefield like an exploding star. Ka-Efe-Ri, Dr. Savannah, and Horus Surman had barely enough time to realize their peril. Blinding light swallowed everything in an eruption of thunder. When the smoke cleared, the three villains lay battered and scattered. Dr. Savannah's gadgets were reduced to molten scrap. Ka-Efe-Ri's bandages smoldered, his undead body forced to retreat once more, slipping into the cracks of the earth, howling in rage. Horus Surman groaned, illusions flickering weakly as he tried to stand. Mightiest Man landed beside Sacred Scarab, panting from exertion. The two locked eyes, a sense of mutual respect born from their synergy. Horus staggered upright, aura feeble. He glared at them, then at Lori Hoshid, who had arrived at the edge of the plateau, anxious but eager to see the outcome. She rushed forward, calling Dan's name. You haven't seen the last of me, Horus hissed, heartbreak and fury in his eyes. I will find every magic word in this universe. I will rewrite reality. Lori. His voice faltered, longing and obsession twisted into one searing emotion. Savannah lay groaning on the ground.
I hate you all, he whispered, refusing to look at the heroes.
For a moment, Horus looked as though he might attack again. Then he collapsed, aura flickering out like a dying flame. Mightiest Man exhaled a heavy breath. Is it over? Sacred Scarab surveyed the scene, scanning with his X-ray vision to ensure Ka-Efe-Ri was gone. For now. The undead pharaoh will return eventually, but he's beaten for the moment. Dr. Savannah is powerless without his machines. And the Aura Seer is unconscious. Lori joined them, gazing sorrowfully at Aura Surman's fallen form. Despite all he'd done, a part of her grieved for the friend she once knew. She shook her head, tears brimming. He became so obsessed. So lost in his own heartbreak. Dan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Sometimes. Heartbreak drives people to madness. But at least now, he can no longer hurt anyone. Mightiest Man gazed at them both, sympathy in his eyes. The tension in the air dissolved, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief and quiet reflection. In the aftermath, local authorities and specialized agencies arrived to contain the damage. Dr. Savannah was apprehended, though he spat vile threats at anyone who drew near, vowing revenge. Aura Surman was placed in a secure medical facility, his powers suppressed by wards studied from ancient texts, coincidentally, notes that Dan had gleaned from tomb inscriptions. Ka-Efe-Ri's presence dissipated back into the ruins of the earth. Dan Garrett knew the cycle was incomplete, that the undead pharaoh would rise again, as long as the sacred scarab existed in his possession rather than sealed in the tomb. But for now, quiet had returned to the land. With everything under control, Mightiest Man turned back to Billy's form, shoulders slumped from fatigue. Dan and Lori smiled at the boy, offering to find him a meal. Billy, who was usually solitary, hesitated but finally accepted. As they sat at a small eatery near the edge of the city, Billy devoured 3 plates of food, remembering how hungry his mortal body got. Dan studied the boy, intrigued. So you're Mightiest Man. But also just a child? Billy nodded. I never chose this life, but the wizard said I'd be Earth's greatest champion. I'm trying to do my best. Lori smiled kindly. You have a good heart, Billy. That's a rare treasure on its own. A subtle warmth spread in Billy's chest at her words. Perhaps, he thought, this was the greatest treasure he'd been seeking all along: connection, companionship, and the knowledge that he wasn't alone in this heroic fight. In the days that followed, the world calmed, the memory of the unholy Trinity's alliance fading into local legend. Mightiest Man took to patrolling once more, but he didn't feel quite so alone now. Across the city, Dan Garrett also kept an eye out for new threats, occasionally crossing paths with the heroic boy. Each time, they exchanged a friendly wave, an unspoken pledge to aid each other in times of crisis. As for Aura Surman, locked away in a secluded facility, he brooded in silence. When he closed his eyes, he still saw Lori's face. The heartbreak did not lessen, but in quiet moments, he pondered the illusions he'd conjured, illusions that reflected his own twisted desire. Perhaps, even if he gathered every magic word in existence, he would never truly fill that void in his heart. Yet the obsession remained. Someday, he promised himself, he would return, stronger, unstoppable, and rewrite reality so that she would be his. Love, after all, was the greatest illusion, and illusions were Aura Surman's specialty. Dr. Savannah languished in a high-security prison, cursing the entire world. He vowed vengeance against Mightiest Man and Sacred Scarab, longing for the day he'd escape to test his next invention. His brilliance would never rest, not while he still lived. Ka-Efe-Ri sank into the earth, sealed again by the Sacred Scarab's power, simmering in hatred. When he emerged once more, he would gather the darkness that grew beneath the sands. He would not rest until he ruled the modern world, just as he once ruled ancient Egypt. The cycle would continue, an ancient evil destined to clash with the Sacred Scarab time and again. But for now, the city breathed a sigh of relief. People swapped stories about the epic battle on the plateau, describing brilliant lightning and cosmic illusions. They whispered about the unstoppable might of a red-suited champion who soared through thunderclouds, and the disciplined valor of a blue Scarab hero with eyes that saw through everything. Some claimed the pharaoh of old fought in broad daylight, wrapped in decaying bandages, while a pale, ghost-like man with horrifying illusions hovered overhead. So many rumors, so many half-truths. Yet one truth remained clear: heroes of magic words had stood together to save the world from an alliance of evil. Their bond, though new and tenuous, opened a path for future cooperation. Mightiest Man, with a boy's heart and a titan's strength, found in Sacred Scarab a kindred spirit, someone who understood the burden of holding immeasurable power. And Sacred Scarab, ever the rational archaeologist, felt a cautious optimism. Magic, so often the subject of skepticism, had proven its potential for great good, provided it remained in the hands of those with righteous hearts. Together, they had overcome a monstrous alliance, by turning their enemies against one another, by combining their powers, and ultimately by refusing to give in to hopelessness. Heartbreak, hatred, greed, all were mighty forces in their own right. But in the end, they were no match for the unwavering resolve of two heroes who fought not for personal gain, but to protect the world. As the sun rose on a new day, Billy Batson boarded a city bus, feeling that familiar tug of wanderlust. He still didn't know exactly where he was headed, but he knew that wherever danger emerged, Mightiest man would be there. As the bus pulled away, Lori and Dan waved goodbye, standing side by side. A silent promise lingered between them: if ever the world needed the sacred Scarab and Mightiest man together, they would meet again, heroes united beneath the crack of thunder and the glimmer of a sapphire scarab. The story of heartbreak, obsession, unholy alliances, and unstoppable power would not soon be forgotten. But for now, the city exhaled, at peace for a time. Such was the legacy of the magic words, Shazam and Kaji Da, and the brave souls who wielded them. One day, these heroes might yet become the greatest protectors of justice the world had ever known. And though their journeys would be filled with trials, each battle would bring them one step closer to the champions they were destined to be. All the while, somewhere in the silence of a secured medical wing, Aura Surman's aura pulsed faintly, flickering like a candle in a dark corridor, biding its time. For in the realm of magic and illusions, nothing was ever truly over. Yet, for now, the world had found a fragile peace, held aloft by the bond of two heroes, the mightiest of men, and the sacred guardian of ages. And that, for the moment, was enough.